Today we're going to talk about why I left Prime. I started with Prime back in September of 2021, the end of the COVID boom. Freight was great, the rates were great, we had more loads than we know what to do with. When I started with Prime, I was making more money than I had ever made in my entire career. But then even in the beginning, I started to see the cracks. 4 weeks with no pay, 4 weeks of a truck payment, stressing out, wondering how I'm going to dig myself out of this hole.
What's going on, good and wonderful people? It's Sage here back with another banger today. So basically, this video is a reaction to a driver that actually quit Prime Inc. And he quit Prime Inc. last year, and he kind of went viral for his channel for small content creators. He went viral and basically received a lot of backlash because essentially he exposed everything that was wrong with the company. But the thing about it is, he left Prime Inc. for Swift, and then he went right back to Prime Inc. and he quit again. So that's what I want to, get into and react to in this video. But before we get into that, I think it's crazy how he said what he said about Prime Inc. and he quit and whatnot, but Prime Inc. actually let him come back, which I find interesting, especially nowadays, because it's like you talk, I don't really want to cuss on this channel, but you talk bad about your employer and you talk bad about them on social media, then a lot of times people actually get fired because of social media posts, especially nowadays, given what's going on in the country and, politics. If you've been keeping up with the news, a lot of people have been losing their jobs over, voicing their opinions online. But, I digress. I won't get down into that rabbit hole. Now, at first, I didn't know this guy's name. His name was Everly Logistics at the time that I reacted to his video, but I saw that he had a referral link on his YouTube channel, and I saw that in the referral link, his name is actually Josh. So shout out to Josh if you're watching this, because I was actually gonna call you Trucking EFD the entire video. So I'm glad that I was able to actually figure out your actual name. But yes, shout out to you. But before I begin this video and make the whole reaction, I do want to make this disclaimer. When I make these videos, they are for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is my reaction to publicly accessible information made public by public figures. Please don't go on their channel to leave mean-spirited, negative, discouraging, disparaging comments. Again, educational and entertainment purposes only. Shout out to you once again, Mr. Josh, if you're watching this video. Because after all, Josh's situation with Prime Inc. really highlights the issues with that company and really trucking in general. And I actually make a lot of videos about Prime Inc. over the past 2 years almost. Prime hates to see me coming. I know they hate to see me coming, especially the lease driver brigade. But shout out to all of you. I think that Prime Inc. is really the greatest trucking company. I mean, seriously.
Who in the world at Prime Inc. like hurt y'all feelings? Like, what happened for y'all to hate this company so much? Like, is it because we're the slowest trucks on the highway? Is it because we are one of the largest mega carriers that still give decent rates? Like, is it the fact that, like, we got cameras and y'all hate that?
The fact that truck drivers overall don't make enough, they're actually pushed. I don't know how, but they're actually pushed to lease a truck, and because that hasn't really been profitable, especially within the past 4 or 5 years, they're pushed again to actually train drivers, at least in Josh's case. And with Prime Inc. In particular, they actually make the lease driver trainers pay their students, which in my opinion is very inappropriate. It's very unsustainable, and it's just downright unacceptable, and it really exposes the greed with this company, at least in my opinion. So here is Josh's backstory. He joined Prime Inc. back in 2020 during the global panoramic. I don't even know if I can say C19. I don't even know if I can actually say this on YouTube, because they do flag people's videos, I'm assuming, still in 2025 at this point. Don't know why. But yes, he joined the company back then, and that's pretty much the best chance you had of making a lot of money in trucking at the time.
Freight was great, the rates were great, we had more loads than we know what to do with. When I started with Prime, I was making more money than I had ever made in my entire career.
Like I said, I referenced this in my last video. Chasing Andrew Jackson's post on his community tab back then in the 80s, drivers were making $40,000 a year on average. In today's money, that's $140,000 a year, but the average truck driver makes half that. Again, y'all can go check it out for yourselves, read this for yourself, pause the video. But yeah, because these trucking companies don't pay enough, drivers literally have to do what they have to do to make ends meet in 2025, and it's really unfortunate. But yes, back in 2020, 5 years ago, freight rates were actually pretty high, and I would argue back then that's when there was actually a true driver shortage, not the nonsense that the ATA pushes nowadays when the money gets funny, the grift isn't grifting anymore. But I digress. Freight rates were actually pretty high back then, so him having to pay students, I mean, it was all good. I mean, it was all rainbows and sunshine. He was making good money. He was making all kinds of money at the time, but then it's not sustainable because right now we're still in one of the longest trucking recessions in recent memory, and it's crazy when you come up on hard times when stuff starts to get bad. It's like everything, like all the cards, the house of cards literally collapses and everything just goes straight to hell at the same time. It's crazy when you're an owner operator and you don't have any type of like emergency savings, and pretty much everything goes wrong at the same time. And for him, it did.
I had to put my truck in the shop for a injector to be replaced. My truck was in the shop for 4 weeks. 4 weeks with no pay. 4 weeks of a truck payment. Stressing out, wondering how I'm going to dig myself out of this hole. Talking to my fleet manager every week, hey, what are we going to do about me being negative? How are we going to get out of this hole? And being told, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. We figured it out. I got breakdown pay, but he failed to tell me that for a whole month that I would receive breakdown pay.
When he was at Prime, his truck needed repairs, and I mean that's generally what you have to deal with as an owner operator. But again, he was a lease driver, and he really wasn't even going to own the truck at the end. But we'll get into that. So his truck needed repairs. He went weeks without pay. There was a lack of transparency, which is a commonality with these mega carriers, and in addition to that, there was a lack of flexibility. His child was just born, and he has a family at home to support, and he barely sees them, especially when it comes to like home time and the fact that you're an OTR driver. Logistically, the trucking companies don't get it right, and it's always a huge inconvenience when they get it wrong.
Just had a daughter back in November. I decided, hey, I'm gonna stay home a couple more days because my daughter's sick. I want to be there to help my wife. I get told I have to leave. You can't sit at home no more. We're not gonna float your truck payment.
So yeah, let's just take a look for ourselves of everything that went wrong for him when he was at Prime Inc.
No other company that offers training to lease operators forces them to pay these students. Prime is the only company that does that. Why should I have to pay your employee when they're not going to come to work for me? They're going to work for you. So I continue to train. Get my next student. He gets in an accident. I have to pay the deductible on that. So I continue to train. We get into 2023. The new student pay package comes out. Prime decides that they need to start paying their students more. If you did less than 3,000 miles for the week, you were paying that student no matter what. You had to stay on top of your students' hours because they're paid technically hourly now. So if they forget to put themselves off duty, or they put themselves on duty on purpose to make more money and you don't catch it, you got to pay that student because they were on duty, so therefore they're getting paid.
So yeah, like I said, paying a student out of pocket, especially given his situation, is very much unacceptable. And it may have been, a good thing during the pandemic, but now it's not. It's not at all. Like I said, we're in the middle of the biggest trucking recession in recent memory. And I just think that Prime Inc. really needs to do better with that type of business model, because when a driver is unprofitable and they lease with the company and they have to pay the student, then it's like, Prime Inc. doesn't give a damn. Essentially, if they are unprofitable, they're going into further debt to pay the students, because apparently the students matter more than the trainers at Prime Inc., at least in my opinion. And I'd actually argue that, Prime Inc. doesn't really care about the students either. And it's not really fair to the students, because students deserve quality trainers with high morale. But when you're in Josh's situation as a trainer, you're dealing with high financial stress. You're under a lot of pressure to make a lot of money to get more miles. And it's kind of hard to do that where you're constantly in the hole. And I actually remember watching a video earlier this week by this trucking content creator. He talked about, pretty much how Prime Inc. is scamming you. Shout out to him. He pretty much says everything that I say that's wrong with Prime Inc., but he pretty much points out the issue with lease drivers paying students. So let's just take a look at that.
I've been reading and hearing, such as trainers having to pay their student wage. The hell is that? And if you're with Prime and you're doing that, why? I'm hoping some Prime drivers that are priming out there, I hope you're watching, and I would love to hear your comments on this. I'm guessing that some of the trainers are doing this because they think they can make more money because they're teaming. But then you're focused more on teaming so you can make your money rather than training the student, right? I mean, how can you focus on training on the student if you're focused on teaming to be able to make the money in order to pay your student, which you shouldn't have to do? And I don't think there's another company that does that.
But yeah, guys, you saw that, you heard that. So because working at Prime Inc. wasn't working out anymore, the math wasn't mathing, he decided to go on to Swift, where he could lease a truck and train, but the difference is that he doesn't have to pay the student out of pocket. So it's actually more lucrative to lease a truck at Swift, and things were going great until they weren't. So he actually had a falling out with the training department. So let's take a look at that.
So Swift feels that because he ran a red light, that I need to lose my training status for 6 months for something that I didn't do, I had no control over because I was sleeping. I mean, he did what he could to protect himself and the motoring public. I mean, there was no one else around him. Luckily, I mean, in the middle of the night, there was no one on the road. But as he was slowing down, he was looking both ways, hitting the air horn just to get, if there was someone there, to get their attention so they could see, hey, this dude's not going to stop. I'm not going to pull out in front of him. But Swift wanted to suspend me. Well, they did suspend me for 6 months from training for something I had no control over. I said, no, we're not going to play this game. You're not going to mess with my livelihood and my money and because of something I didn't do. I could understand if it was something I did, then yeah, you know what? If you have a trainer that's making that kind of mistake, then you know maybe, yeah, they shouldn't be training. And while I was, because my student only had like a week and a half left, so in that week and a half time, I figured, you know what, I still want to train. Maybe I can go back to Prime.
So yeah, I hate that he had to go through with that. I don't know if he leased the entire time he was at Swift. I'm assuming that he did, but again, these trucking companies overall just don't pay drivers very well, and then drivers feel inclined to lease a truck to potentially make more money, and then when that doesn't work out, then they feel inclined to train to make more money, and then when that gets taken away from you, in the case of Josh, he had to make a business decision and return to Prime, which I again find crazy that he was able to do that considering everything he said on YouTube about Prime. Again, he is a contractor, not an employee, so there is a big difference. But at the same time, Prime does reserve the right to cancel your contract if, you do stuff out of line, because I know they did the same thing with Terry from Tim Travels when he pretty much did what he did with his student, his trainee at Prime Inc. So yeah, pretty sure Prime Inc. has the right to cancel your contract and block you from ever contracting with them again. But this is Josh. They let him come back, and things were going pretty well with the Prime until, again, they weren't.
I didn't want to have to make this video, but I knew deep down eventually I would have to, because I know I can only put up with disrespect and stupidity for so long. And that's what Prime is. Nothing but disrespect and stupidity. Chris Martin, I believe his name is giving his little speech on we should be proud of ourselves and we're doing great things, yada yada yada. And you ask him, hey, has anything been put in place to protect the trainer from going negative because of having to pay the student because there's no freight, or to, or have you guys gone back to the way it used to be where if we didn't run X amount of miles in the week that you guys pay the student? And he says, no, we don't care if you make money. You're not here to make money. You're here to train our drivers. Prime says, oh, we don't have freight. We don't have freight. We don't have any loads for you guys. But yet they're giving loads to Trans Am and Wilson. I mean, granted, they're probably crappier, less paying loads, but if that's the only freight you're getting, then maybe you should make adjustments to where you can give those loads to the drivers that work for you instead of another company. But that's just me as a truck driver. That would make too much sense to take care of the people that you hire to work for you.
Like I said earlier, we're in a really, really long freight recession, which is that's interesting because I remember reading an article last year by FreightWave saying that the trucking recession was actually over, and I wonder what happened to that. I guess it's not over. It hasn't been over, and I don't know if it's going to be over anytime soon. But I find it interesting how, far the pendulum just swung back and drivers are just really unprofitable nowadays. Owner operators are struggling, which is a huge contrast from the C19 freight boom. And even though freight is short, the rates are pretty low. For whatever reason, Prime Inc. is still hiring student drivers. I don't know why. Literally depressing freight. And these drivers, these student drivers are going to feel inclined to lease a truck where they suffer the financial consequences of their lease program. It's just ridiculous. Prime Inc. lease trucks are about $1,200 to $1,500 a week. Very expensive. They, for the most part, they have this rent a truck program, and then they have the success leasing program where you can actually do something similar with SFI. You make payments to actually own the truck someday. But for the most part, a lot of people do the rent a truck program. So they're still stuck with the same type of lease payment, which is very, very expensive. $1,200, $1,300 is a lot, especially if you don't end up owning the truck in the end. You just move on to the next lease. All the responsibilities of an owner operator with very little benefit. Shout out to Mr. Josh because I think he is no longer fooling with these mega carriers. He's actually doing flatbed now, which is great for him. I don't know if he's leasing a truck, but he seems happier with his new position. Changes, while it can, be overwhelming, it can actually be a positive thing. And I didn't mention this earlier in the video. He's actually been in the industry for about 20 years now. I think he started in 2006. Dang, 2006 was 20 years ago. Jesus. But yeah, I do want to wrap up this video by saying that Prime Inc. has received a lot of hype over the years, especially with these drivers getting all these referrals. They've made a lot of money. Some people have even made six figures just off driver referrals alone, which is insane. And in Josh's case, he benefited from the C19 freight boom that pretty much everybody that was in the industry at the time benefited from. But then it all came crashing down, and now drivers have to, find a way to essentially rob Peter to pay Paul. But at the end of the day, I mean, people are still going to come to Prime Inc. It's essentially a CDL mill. There's orientation every Monday. Drivers are still going to feel inclined to do that rent-a-truck program and suffer the consequences as a result. But hey, it is what it is. Shout out to the Prime Inc. Brigade that's going to come in my comment section and leave all types of comments coming after me. You guys are the greatest. I love you guys. If you enjoy content like this, hit the like button, comment, rate, share, and subscribe. I am Taja Ellison, and I'll see you next time.